Hello, this is Mary back again to give an update on the rag quilt that I'm working on. Last time I talked a lot about how I was building the blocks and making the scrappy sections and choosing the layout and the widths for the different fabrics. And then I went through and I assembly lined a massive number of the triangle blocks, which is half of the half of this square block. So an example of that would be this right here is 10 pairs of triangle pieces. So this would make 10 final blocks. I'll show you some more of that in a second. But once I got to this stage where I'm trying to understand what the final block looks like, I was having some questions and some uncertainties about how I was going to put it together. So I have a couple examples here of things I've worked on and I've tried. And my original thought was, since I had built these side pieces as the triangles, and they were already assembled by themselves, that the amount of lines that needed to happen on the back of the quilt blocks for the rag quilt, I could be efficient with the number of lines that I was putting in and build the sandwich at the time that I'm putting the block together. May or may not have been the right choice. So here we are. Where I got to was I had the side triangle pieces. I had a center strip and then another set of triangle pieces. So then I grabbed my quilt sandwich, which at the time what I was using, or what I was thinking was, I had these two different sheets that I had cut up that were Egyptian cotton that I had gotten on clearance at Sam's for 25 bucks a piece. So I got king size sheets, and then I had a king size sheet, a layer of flannel for floof and warmth, and then I had a background fabric, and I had chosen this type of a grunge looking type fabric, but I wasn't sure I was liking it, and it wasn't really working for me. And this the gray just looked a lot lighter, but I wasn't sure yet. So I started playing with it. So I put the center jelly roll strip, one of these type jelly roll strips, down the center, placed it on the center of the entire pile, and then I sewed a triangle onto it through the entire sandwich. So that would be this line right here. And promptly realized that I had forgot to change to a matching thread. Don't like that. So did not like having the white stitching on the back. So then, of course, all right, switch to a different bottom thread, but I still needed the top thread to match the top fabric. So now I'm getting why it's not usually a lot of contrast in the front and back of a quilt, because that just doesn't really work. So what I ended up doing was I tested out some quilting lines using a matching thread, which was, I think I used a black or a gray, possibly just black. And I was trying to figure out how much quilting is needed to kind of hold this together. Since it's not a traditional quilt sandwich, it's not being traditionally quilted across the entire design, the lines that are covering this, the lines that are putting these pieces together, are the only thing holding it together. And so then I started having doubts about the fact that I had to sew these open, or iron these sections open so that they would lay flat, and then I had to push this to the side. So there's not very much holding this together without an overall free motion quilting type design. So I was having some doubts. So then I started playing around with it a little bit. So this one I went through, and since these were already assembled, the only stitch line I had to play with was I tried one across the middle of the blocks, hated it. There's no way to get it straight. There's no way, like even if there's some variance in the width of the strip, if I tried to run a line down the center of it, a stitching, it just looked terrible. Sorry if you just heard the dog barking. So what I tried next was I tried like a stitch in the ditch situation off to the side here, which I think you could probably see. I've picked some spots out here, so that just is dimpled. But I tried the stitching in the ditch on the white part. And then I got to thinking about it later. Since I had, because I wanted to look nice, I had ironed everything to the color side. Then everything I stitched in the ditch was just stitching the white fabric down. And none of the color fabric was getting secured to the actual quilt block. Probably not a good plan. So, tried some other things. I think this is, probably where I landed, and I really like it. So, first thing I started playing with the quilt sandwich, so I was trying a lighter combination, and then I went through and I did stitch in the ditch, but not the ditch. I did like I think it's called top stitching. I think I did what we would call top stitching. Let me find a dark section here so I can show it to you really good. So I did right on the edge of the color fabric on each strip. Now, it's probably going to take me 600 miles of thread to do this, but it looks fantastic. It looks very precise and clean. It is also 1000% more secure because it's holding each of these pieces in place to the white, which is underneath that color piece because I had ironed it that way. And it puts lovely lines on the back. So we have 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, and then I have 1, 1, 1. And then this corner section here that has a bit of more space is going to get eaten up by the seam allowances. So it's not going to be very much space anyway. So that works really good. But where I ran into an order of operations issue with this one is if I was continuing to build the block, meaning I laid this white centerpiece down and then I attached the two sides, if I'm building it that way and then I'm going back and top stitching on this line, then that would put a double line on the back. And I didn't like that idea. So now we have pivoted, which you're allowed to pivot when it's your own plan. So we have pivoted to building each of the blocks without the back. So we're building the blocks with the centerpiece in it so that we can then mount it to the backing and the top stitching that is securing all of the individual pieces and all of the scrappiness and holding the whole thing together, and building the quilt sandwich and building the lines on the back is all happening at the same time. So where I was also struggling a little bit was I just can't get on board with the dark. It's just too dark. Combined with, I was also noticing that this fabric has a very clear front versus back. It is not like a batik where it pulls through. It's not a true solid. So this back section kind of has this weird color tone that's a little olivey. I can't really explain it. And that will definitely show up because in the rag situation, it is featured. Both sides of the fabric are being featured. It won't show up as much. It won't be as obvious with the color fabric because I feel like that's smaller little bits of color and it won't be as weird. But if there was just an equal amount of the correct color and then the wrong color, I think it would just be confusing and weird, and it just felt too heavy and too dark. So what we have done, what we industriously, me or myself, have done is I've pivoted and adjusted to, I will keep the flannel layer for fuzziness and for the weight, because I like the weight. It's has drape and it's nice and it's all cotton, so it feels fantastic. And then we'll have the crisp lines on the front, and then we'll have the edges on the back where the rag parts will be on the back. So it will be a blank gray, but then it'll have all of these little fun colorful strips in between each of the blocks. So I did just figure out I have enough sheet material in the white and the gray to do one for each. So the gray piece and a white piece per quilt block for both colorways. And then the flannel layer, I have a blue, a cool blue. I believe it was an aqua. And then I also have a white flannel. So this will be the sandwich that is building. It's hard to see the color. There is no color because it's white. This will be the sandwich for the warm tones, for the pinks and the oranges. So it will have the white sheet, the white flannel, and the gray. And then for the cool tones, we will have the gray sheet, the blue aqua flannel, and then the white sheet. So these are the sandwiches for these two. So let me put this down, and then I will show you the assembly line that I have been working on. We will yeet this. Okay. So I'll show you what I've been doing to try to get as efficient as possible. So I have to turn this whole pile over because I forgot to do it in order. All right. So the starting pile, this is assorted and counted 10 pairs of triangle sets and 5 strips of, currently snowing, Jelly Roll white, ultra white, I believe, from Moda. Ultra white, super white, something white. It just says a number. I don't know. Okay, so I didn't end up using these paper piecing papers for actual paper piecing. I ended up kind of using them to help organize. So in this folded up triangle or folded up square, I have 2 sections of, two sections of the triangle sets. And they have all been ironed because I ironed them as I was doing them. So the color fabric has been ironed open. The white fabric has been ironed to the color side. And then to keep track of them, because that's a lot of open seams and it's shedding everywhere, I put them in these little organizer-y kind of things and stuck a pin in them so I could say that is one block. So then I could count them. So then I created a stack of 10. I have tried to make 40 because I think I'm going to end up somewhere in the 36 range, maybe. Like a 6x7. I haven't figured out exactly what size it's going to be. It's going to be whatever it ends up being. So this is how I've kept them organized. So from there, what I was coming up with, all that snow is making me want to sneeze. Okay. So what we ended up with is we have our Jelly Roll strips, and each of these pieces, I should have left one out. Each of these pieces is how long? Looks like 14 inches on this long side. And you need a little extra on the corners. You can't just cut the white at that 14-inch mark because it's going out a little further. Let me show you what I mean. What I'm talking about. Okay. So if I cut it at the edge of the color, I would lose this triangle point here. And I was too lazy to do all the math to figure out exactly how many inches it needed to go. So we're going to have a little waste but I was trying to limit the waste, but we're basically ending up with, here's a jelly roll strip folded in half, and basically one triangle per half of a strip. So that means one strip is going to make you one block. But I like to chain piece and just sort of go into one mode and do one thing at a time. So what I was doing was I was taking the strip and I was placing one block on it, keeping it kind of centered in between the center fold and the selvage, or pretty close to the selvage with a little bit of space in the center, and just tacking that on there, and then tacking the next one on there, and then put them aside. So then I keep these together. After I was doing that, I had, this says, half of the triangles, 2 per strip. Okay, so this is a set that I've already sewn to the first strip. Okay, so haven't ironed it yet. I've only sewn it. So this is, I did the strip on the bottom and I did the color on the top so that I could make sure that all of the open seams remained open. I could keep an eye on them. And now this is its piece by itself. So since I had 10 pairs and I've only sewn one side, I have 10 that have the white strip on them, and I have 10 that do not. Now, in my testing pieces, I started realizing pretty quickly that it is a little difficult to get the points across from each other lined up when they're crossing a middle section. So I was trying to get them as reasonably close as possible so that when I have to trim the entire block, I'm not having a bunch of waste. So the way I hacked that situation was, because I would end up with them off kilter from each other, because there's not an easy way to line that up. So what I did was, when I took them downstairs and was ironing while watching TV, I ironed them. Ooh, this one's got a pin. Well, it's got a pin in the middle because I was going to show you a pin in the middle. All right, so I ironed them open with the strip. So the first set that I've done 10 with a half a triangle on it with the center strip. Then I went down and I ironed them open, or ironed, not open, ironed it to the dark side with the white strip with one side. So then I took all of them with the white strip and I folded them in half, matched up the cut line, and I pressed this corner. Pressed that corner. While I already had the iron out, already was working on getting that straight and lined up, I pressed this corner, and then I grabbed the pile of the other side of the triangles and I folded them the opposite direction. So this one I folded with wrong sides out, and then the little triangles I folded right sides in. So I could nest those 2 ironed creases right there in the center. And I only put a pin in the center and at the tippy top of that piece where it starts. I didn't put a pin at the bottom because it's only about 6 inches of sewing. And once I get that center locked in, if I can keep the center lined up, then the rest of it is not that hard. I'm just literally sewing a triangle onto a strip. It's not that difficult. So I just needed that top bit to be secure so it didn't like wander off on me. Because when I tried to eyeball it, it wandered off on me. So I didn't want to have to sew from the center left and right to get it to line up. So I just sort of just did the fold, did the crease, and then now I've placed a bunch of them. I've pinned a bunch so that I can run them through the machine again. And then I will have my final blocks, which will be ready to build my sandwiches. And then I can do all of the top stitching at the same time. So this one, I have actually sewn both sides. So let me pull that post-it off, and I'll show you how it looks. So this one, I've sewn the second side. I did use the little crease. So when I iron it, again, the last time, I will take out that crease so you won't see it. But there's the crease in the second triangle and that one that had nested together quite nicely and sewn together. So now it is a full and proper block. Oops, a little floppy. So the final block situation, let me grab it again. This one, this one, this one. Okay. Ooh, I have 4. I don't know that I can hold 4, but I have 4 that I can play with. At least I can show you two of them. So when I put this together on the front, it will, all of the seams will be in the back, and all of the ragginess will be on the back, and we'll have the X's and O's on the front. Let's see if we can see that. Ooh, it does look nice. Almost. There we go. There we go. So we'll have the long strip in the middle making an X, and then the smaller strips will be mirroring, making a little hourglass or pinwheel kind of thing, and then also making the X's and O's. Quite cute. And I will be going back with the quilt sandwiches and doing the full top stitching. My plan is to build all of the top blocks and then do the top stitching on the edges here. I'm using a pretty small seam allowance. I have a Singer Featherweight, so I don't have a number for you. It's not like a 2 on a regular machine. It's I have no idea. It's very small. Because I did want it to look like top stitching and not just regular basting or regular sewing stitching. So it's very, very pretty little micro stitches there. And it looks nice on the back as well. And then I can square them up. I believe I cut the flannel at almost 13-inch squares just to give myself a little wiggle room. I did try to focus this one on this corner, so this side has more leeway or more overage, so that's less trimming, hypothetically. But I haven't figured out the trimming yet. I'm sure after I do 80 blocks, I'll probably be an expert at trimming and need a new blade, or probably will put a new blade in before I start that. But not sure exactly what size it's going to come out as a finished block, so then I guess that's going to dictate what the final size ends up being. But I'm going to avoid trimming it down probably until the last minute, because I want to make sure I have a consistent size and a consistent shape. I had trimmed this one down, and it's so much smaller. I think I can get a lot bigger out of it. I don't think I need to trim it quite so harsh, quite so significantly. But when I put it on this blue one, I think that's about the seam allowance size. So, I mean, with a rag quilt, you do more than 1/4 inch of seam allowance. You do a 1/2 inch so that you have the floofiness. So I think it'll probably end up finished at about 12. Let me check that. Yeah, looks about 12. Or is that 10? That's 10. I'm tired. It's Friday afternoon. Okay. So unfinished looks about 11.5. Finished should be about 11 or 10. I'm not doing math. Don't quote me on that one. Okay. So to recap, first of all, using the assembly to put the block together to make the rag did not end up working. Didn't like it. It just didn't feel structurally sound enough to me for something that I am expecting will be washed weekly, used weekly, and loved, and I want it to be. So I wanted the pieces to be as secure as possible. So I like the top stitching, and then the back, I just couldn't, I don't know, I just didn't like the black. It just didn't really work. I guess it's a dark gray, but it just didn't feel right. So I am going to work on that. I did come across, did notice that if I start cutting things, it's very easy to lose track of how many you have, and how many you haven't cut. So I started crisscrossing and counting as I went. So if this is a stack, then it's a stack of 10, and then the next stack is a stack of 10. So I can see I have 40 white squares, and then I have 40 blue squares. The blue is fluffier than the white. Not sure how that one happened. Must have got them in different places. And then the sheets, because they were so huge and the weave was so tight, I did end up ripping those. I ended up tearing them, and I tore them rather generous, and not exactly 1000% square. So just was trying to get that done as quickly as possible, cut off all of the weirdness on the fitted sheets, and then made as many squares as I could, as approximately the size I needed. So there will be a little bit of overage and cut off on those, but that's fine. But I counted those off as 10 as well, just to try to keep it organized. So I'm going to finish constructing the blocks. I have a couple piles of the pink ones to go ahead and get going. I think I have all of the blue ones with at least one line of, or one set on the center line already. So that's worked out pretty good. And in a roll, you get 40 strips, which I was having a moment of math there. So 40 strips, I can get 2 blocks out of each strip. So that means I can get 80 blocks, which if I cut the roll in half, then I can get 40 blocks of blue, 40 blocks of pink, 2 per line, 20 strips each. It works. I think there'll be a lot of little white squares left over, or probably like little chunks of white, but I can find another way to use those in something else. But that's where we are. Hopefully one day I will finish this. I'm going to keep working on it, and we'll see what is next.